today is the topic of today is the ongoing assessment of the post-disaster recovery of Haiti using sentiment analysis or mining opinion. This is the assessment for the earthquake in 2010. So, this is the outline of the presentation. We go through the background, a quick introduction. I'm going to show you the methodology, the preliminary results that I have got, that I have obtained, some discussion, some limitation, and future developments. I'm going to start, and it's a big exercise also for the audience, is to, I would like to ask you to tell me some words, what comes to your mind when I mention the word Haiti. So you can just look at the QR code or go to the website, to the link with the code.
I'm just wondering if you could put that into the chat, maybe.
Yes, of course, I can also do it. Let me see if I can. Maybe I have to go out of the presentation mode. Yes, and then the chat. Yes, and the code. Let me go out for a moment, and maybe I stop sharing the screen, and I'm going to Mentimeter. If I can open it here, presentations. Okay, let me share the screen here. Okay, yes, some of you have participated, thank you. Disaster, earthquake, Caribbean, poverty, Española. Yes, those are the most common words that comes to our mind when we talk about Haiti. I'm gonna stop sharing again, and I'm going back to the presentation. The presentation. I want to start to tell that besides all those problems, Haiti, it's plenty of resilient people that have to go through many things, disasters, political instability, and poverty. But they also have beautiful. They also have beautiful beaches. They also have gorgeous mountains. And it was the first country in America that managed to get their independence in 1802. And that was really expensive for them because they had to pay expensive indemnity to France in order to be recognized as a country around the world. They also have their own beer brand. They also have their own beauty products, and also they have food that is a mix between Taino, French, and Caribbean food. Unfortunately, as I said before, this country had to go through many problems during the history. They were discovered in 1492. The French arrived in the 17th century. The indigenous population, the Tainos, were exterminated. That's why many Africans were imported as a slave labor. There was a revolution, and they were independent of France. Then they have their own empire. They have a lot of political struggles until they were occupied by United States until 1934. There was election and cops beat until 1957. Then start a dictatorship area, a really, really hard dictatorship from Papa Doc, that it's Duvalier, and Baby Doc, that was his son. They struggled for democracy between 1986 until now. The last president was Juvenel Moïse, who was assassinated, was murdered last year in July 2021. Currently, there is no president. I think there is an interim president, and actually the country is in the hands of guns. When somebody mentioned disaster, it's true. It's uncountable the number of hurricanes that have hit Haiti, like Matthew in 2016, the earthquake in 2010, the cholera epidemic that hit the country between 2010 and 2020, and the earthquake last year. This country is exposed to seismic hazard. Here we can see the fault. It's exposed also to tropical storms, and therefore floods or landslides. Actually, this is something that I forgot to mention, is the country in the Caribbean with the highest mountains. And this is the topic of our talk today. So at 4:53, the January 12th, an earthquake with a magnitude 7 struck Port-au-Prince, and it's estimated that it killed 316,000 people. The number is not definitive. Some other publications talk about 200,000, and some others they want really low. Why? Because there is no one institution who really counted the number of casualties. So the number of damages was estimated to be $7.8 billion. Here we can see a picture of the cathedral and the presidential palace from one of the temporary shelters. This earthquake was the result of the Caribbean tectonic plate. Here we see and the North American plate sliding past each other on the east-west direction. Now, how was Haiti before the earthquake? Yes, it was the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. So they also have really poor sanitation condition, and they have really poor education infrastructure. Now, what happened with the earthquake? As I said before, 500 million of people were affected by the earthquake. But here, you see, it says not 316,000, it says 220,000 casualties. So there is no coincidence between the numbers. So here we can see all the number of schools that were destroyed, officials that died, and is not caused by the earthquake, but given that the United Nations forces, especially the group from Nepal arrived, they brought with them the cholera. That was an illness that was eradicated in America 100 years ago, and it was the largest cholera outbreak recorded in the region in years. And it affected not only Haiti, it also affected the Dominican Republic, the neighbor country, and Venezuela. Now, most of the authors divide the post-disaster recovery in 4 phases. I prefer to use the names allocated by the United Nations Development Program. And after 10 years, it's supposed that we should be around this phase. And after 10 years, it's a good time to make an assessment of the progress of the post-disaster recovery. So if it's even difficult to get numbers on the number of casualties, I mean, to do an assessment through institutions in Haiti will be even more difficult. Then what we use is social media. Social media, it's able to provide us large number of text and image data, and from then it's possible to extract information. Then, but what is the problem with this data? This is, in the case of text data, this is unstructured data. Then we need to use natural language processing techniques such as sentiment analysis to classify this data according to their polarity. Of course, in case of an earthquake, most of the data will have usually a negative polarity. After 10 years, this tendency maybe should change according to the progress of the recovery. So data is negative because there are expression of anxiety, is neutral, is data related to the magnitude of the earthquake, and positive data should be data related to the progress of the recovery. Then, this technique was used before for customer reviews of hotels and places like restaurants. But here, sentiment analysis are used for post-disaster recovery assessment. Why? Because I believe that the post-disaster recovery assessment is a kind of service that should be provided by the government to the citizens affected by an earthquake. So what I did is that we collected data related to the post-disaster, to the anniversary of the earthquake between the 6th of January 2020 and the 15th January in the same year. We managed to collect this number of tweets. 17% were original, the rest were retweets using these hashtags. As you can see, the peak of the data collected was exactly the day in which it was the 10th anniversary of the earthquake. Here, I would like to show you a couple of examples of tweets. This shows some houses on reconstruction. This one shows some houses that were also reconstructed. So we defined some classification rules. So those tweets that talk about reconstruction actions, learning the lessons from the event, that send solidarity messages, that announce jobs, that promote Haitian products, or promote Haiti as a touristic attraction, or promote the social and artistic initiative in Haiti are considered positive because all of them contribute to the recovery. Negative polarity, those tweets that mention the unfulfilled reconstruction goals, the inability to forget the earthquake because they can reveal some distress or still some post-traumatic stress disorder, the depopulation, the management of the funds for reconstruction, the mention of sexual abuse, human trafficking, and cholera epidemic, the comments about the food insecurity and the political instability in the country, and neutral polarity, those tweets that just inform about seismic information and the commemoration ceremonies. Then, what we did, as I said before, we have 47 to 105,000 of tweets. So to start, I focus on those tweets that were written posted in English, that are around 4,206 also. And what I did is this time I use a software that is called MonkeyLens, that is service as a software. And what I did is I took a 10% of those tweets, that is 406 tweets, and I trained the algorithm, and I told the algorithm this tweet is positive, this tweet is negative, this tweet is neutral, or this tweet is not related. And based on that training, the algorithm developed a classification model and is able to predict the polarity for the other 3,000 3,600 tweets. Now, based on the classification of the original tweets in English, because there are also tweets in Spanish, in French, of course, in German, and in Italian. And even some of the tweets in English include some parts in French and some parts in Haitian Creole, which is the local language. Then, as I said before, I focus only on those in English. So I classifying the originals, and later I classify also originals and retweets. So here we can see that when I classify a sample of the 5%, most of the polarity is negative. When the sample that I classify was the 20% of all the tweets, sorry, here I make a mistake. This is more. The polarity increased to 57, the negative polarity increased to 57.6% of the tweets. And here, when I have already classified the 50% of the tweets, 23,870, the polarity went down to 47 tweets, but still the most of the polarity is negative. Then I would like to show you example of tweets classified into each polarity. So this is a tweet of negative polarity, which is the majority, and you said that it discussed that the number of houses that it was promised, that it was 15,000, and at the end, USAID only built up 900 houses. The positive polarity. In this tweet, an NGO highlights that they have support people to build up 800 houses, and they have also trained in safe construction skills. A tweet with neutral polarity mentioned that a commemoration ceremony that took during the 10th anniversary of the earthquake. Now, an unrelated tweet, this is an example, talk about a book about some massacre of Haitians living in the Dominican Republic. Why still it's included in the dataset? Because some people use those hashtags related to the anniversary to promote their products. Now, somebody can tell me, okay, but how we validate that the polarity really reflects the situation after the earthquake? And then if we go to numbers, we can see that the amount of money raised by donors, from then only the 0.9% really went to humanitarian assistance undertaken by or managed by the Haitian government. It is possible to see that from the aid disbursed by donors, only the 0.6% went to Haitian organization. The rest went to US organization. In 2019, there were still 33,000 people living in internal displacement. Sorry, in 2018, 33,000 people were still considered like internal displaced population. Canaan is one of the biggest temporary shelters that is not temporary anymore. And at the time of the earthquake, there were 0 people living there. Now, 10 years, now 12 years, there are already 300,000 people living there. This is the amount of money that was raised by the Red Cross. And they only built 6 houses. USAID, as was mentioned in the tweet, planned to build 15,000 houses. And they raised $59 million. And in the end, they only built 900 houses. That's not even the 1%. Now, there was planning some construction, some site to reconstruct houses, and it was planned that it must be only 8 miles for Port-au-Prince. Okay, the the miles for proto-plants were 750 of the 900 houses were built. It's 120 instead of only 8 miles. It's supposed that the houses will cost $8,000, and at the end, those 750 houses end costing 77,125. I mean, those houses, the number of those houses built to earthquake standard was 0. So they are just rebuilding the physical vulnerability. This is the number of money that costs to the US taxpayer to fix those problems of those houses. And the resources from the US government end in March 25th in 2015. And those contractors who didn't accomplish with their contracts, none of them were fined. So this is the amount of money that USAID expended in Haiti, and the 54% were to US contractors, and only 2.6% went to Haitian companies and organizations. Now, there is a project that was the Caracal Industrial Park, yes, that costed 350 million. This park was built up, this industrial park was built up in the north of the country when the earthquake was in the south. So there was no job opportunities for people affected by the earthquake. This opened in 2012, and it's supposed that it will create 65,000 jobs. And at the end, it only created 10,000. And it's supposed that they will build a new port for that industrial park. And at the end, the plan was aborted. So the construction of this industrial park, displaced 400 people, and only on 2018, there was an agreement, a kind of indemnity for those people paid by the Inter-American Development Bank. So in 1990, this is the minimum salary of a person in Haiti, $15. Now, or at least for 2019, is 9.6, is even less. So also the amount of dollars in textile exported in 2019, okay, increased a bit in 2019, and this only in 2013, the GDP in Haiti reached its pre-earthquake level. So the GDP growth since 2013 is only 0.1%. One Haitian gorgeous, that is the local currency per dollar, at the time of the earthquake was 40. Now, $1 costs 92 Haitian gorgeous. The inflation rate is rocketed from 3 to 17 in 2019. So there was 3 missions in United Nations, and the MINUSTAT, that is like the mission for the stabilization mission, stay in the country for 13 years. And now we came to the role of United Nations in Haiti. Sri Lanka peacekeeper who sexually abused children in this period was 134, and 114 were removed, but any of them went to prison. 265 fathered children in Haiti, and the allegations of sexual abuse even before the earthquake went to 150. The first day of the Haitian contracted cholera was October 19, 2010, and it took 2,129 days to United Nations to admit the responsibility for the introduction of cholera. This is the number of cases. This is the number of people who died due to cholera. And this number also is a bit dodgy, because one epidemiologist estimate that they underestimate the toll is underestimated in 8%, in a factor of 8. Now, the fraction of donors spent in responding to cholera outbreak was 1/10, and the ranking of the development index before the earthquake for Haiti was 149, and currently Haiti went down to the level 169. So with these results, we can still see that the polarity really reflects how the progress of the post-disaster recovery have been ongoing. Now, there are some elements to discuss, that is, for instance, the tweets that were mainly negative, or they have mainly a negative polarity, but it was not always like that. That's why it's necessary to take care with the samples and collect as much data as is possible, because in the when I arrived with this, when I got the sample of 45%, I found a tweet that was you can read it here. It is a message of solidarity, which is a positive. Is classified with a positive polarity. However, a message of solidarity doesn't contribute too much to the reconstruction or to the recovery. Then, and in this case, this tweet was retweeted 5,000 times. That's why it changed the polarity, turned it positive. Yes. But then when I have been progressing with the classification, still the negative polarity is increasing again. So this was a kind of outlier. The other option is that is a bit more complicated, is not to make the polarity analysis at tweet level, but to make it at sentence level. Because if you see, the first part of the tweet is negative and the rest is positive. So this bring us to future development. So I told you that to extract meaningful information from unstructured text data, we need to use sentiment analysis. But I think it will be necessary to use another natural language processing technique that is called topic analysis. So far, we have identified topics on tweets for emergency response. I have progressing identify some topics that are exclusively to post-disaster recovery, like to reconstruction, that is the physical dimension, the recovery that covers the socioeconomic, the cultural, the institutional, the fund management, the memorial ceremonies, and the distress, because we cannot talk about a post-traumatic stress disorder if you don't carry a proper medical analysis. And unfortunately, for the case of Haiti, there are 3 topics that are exclusively for this case, that is sexual abuse, human trafficking, and cholera epidemic. So I want to show you some examples of those particular topics, tweets related to those particular topics. One is the fund management. In this case, Clinton Foundation is mentioned all the time using really rude expressions. And many of those Twitter accounts were suspended. But if you go to see numbers, I mean, of course, for sure there was a really dark mismanagement of resources. In the case of sexual abuse, this is one of the tweets, and also some of the Twitter accounts were suspended. But if you look into academic publications, you can find evidence that this existed, also as the human trafficking. In the tweets is mentioned children. What I found in journals, in papers, is they talk more about human traffic of women. And definitely the cholera epidemic, there is no discourse. There are a lot of papers that prove that the cholera epidemic was introduced by the UN Peace Corps. Now, what are the limitations? Well, this data is not georeferenced, but I found that some data can indicate some point of recovery, like one company that indicate points of distribution of their products in Haiti. That could be points of recovery. It will be good to train social media users to report progress of the post-disaster recovery that include more information and sometimes avoids, solidarity tweets expressing solidarity are very good, but they are noisy for the data analysis. The cleaning and processing data is still time consuming, but if you want to have an accurate analysis, you need to clean properly the data. So far, we got a good accuracy, 71% of accuracy between the supervised classification done by me and the classification done by the algorithm. And actually, there are some mistakes from the algorithm that it's because there are tweets related to the promotion of products and IT and products and touristic places that, of course, they are not really related to the earthquake, but this promotion proves that there are signs of recovery, so they are classified with positive polarity. But this is something that the algorithm don't understand, because one of the problems with algorithms, and that's why they are artificial intelligence, is because they don't understand the context, and this is the role of humans when we classify this data. Now, the future development is now I'm using a no-code tool that is the Monkey Learn, but it will be good to try tools developed by Cardiff University, like the Cosmos software, yes, that also integrate another classifier that is senti-strength, in which, besides confidence, every time that the algorithm classified a tweet, allocate a confidence that is confident percent on the classification of this tweet. So this senti-strength allocate like a range, which is another approach. And I have to say that as much data you train it, the accuracy is increased. I tried to classify only the 1% of the data. The confidence was really like 30%. When I classified the 5%, it went maybe to 50. And when I classified the 10% of the data, the confidence in the classification even rise to 1 or 70%. These are some of the reference that I used for these preliminary results on an ongoing analysis. So thank you very much, or merci, or merci beaucoup in French. Yes.
Thank you, Diana. That's a very moving and a very interesting talk there. I didn't realize Haiti had such a sort of tragic history as well. As per normal now, if anyone's got any questions, please raise your hand or put a question into the chat as well, and we can start with TC.
Hi, Diana.
Hi, TC.
It was a really interesting talk. I really enjoyed it, and really interesting to see that the forgotten phase of that Haitian earthquake really sort of outlined. But I actually don't have a question about I have lots of questions about that, but I have a question about the data actually.
Yes, please.
So obviously Twitter is sort of had a lot of criticism recently around disinformation, around planting of false tweets and all of that kind of stuff. And so I guess I'm curious, how reliable do you think it is? I mean, in this instance, it seems fairly reliable, as there's no political will, or it doesn't seem like there's any reason for there to be disinformation. But I guess I'm curious to know, I'm seeing it more and more in the hazard world. How reliable is Twitter, is the question.
Well, based specifically on the data of Haiti, as you say, it's very reliable. What I wonder is, many tweets talk about, discuss the topic of trafficking of children. Those tweets those Twitter accounts were suspended, TC, and I tried to look into academic literature and in news about that prove those trafficking of children, and I haven't found it. and I haven't found it. I remember in news around the time, but I have to look for if there was trafficking of children. That's one of the dodgy topics that I have to still look. But what I noticed is that Twitter suspended also all the Twitter accounts that criticize the role of Clinton Foundation. That I'm not sure it was more censorship than that. Well, I have to admit also that many of the tweets that criticize the role of Clinton Foundation use really rude words and really rude expressions. Yes. And maybe that's a reason for which Twitter suspended that account. But if you go to the numbers that I show you at the end, those tweets don't lie. They just use bad expressions, but they don't lie at all. Yes.
Yeah.
No, so one sign of no reliability could be that the Twitter suspend the account, but you still have to look further.
Yeah. No, thanks. It's a really interesting problem.
Yeah, thanks.
Any further questions? John?
Yeah, hi Diana.
Hi, John.
So hang on, let me turn my camera on. Here we go. So so with that in mind, and not a physical disaster, I guess, will there now be people monitoring tweets coming out of Ukraine? And you know, I mean, it's all over Twitter. You know, people obviously are putting a whole range of things on. And I just wondered, you know, clearly there's got to be an element, I'm guessing, of censorship of any tweets that are maybe permitted from Russia, if they are. It would just be interesting to see if people are studying similar sorts of things with, you know, the horrendous things that are happening there.
Yeah, definitely. You can select the hashtags that you see more frequent, and you can collect it manually. Just look for them. You can also use Cosmos. I haven't used it, but I was in the webinar that was held by the computer science department, and you can also collect tweets using that software. Okay. You can also purchase. If you want to, I mean, because manually you will collect very few amount, but at least you can skip those not related tweets. With Cosmos, you can collect more, and also purchasing the data from people who have already developed the API to extract the data. What something interesting that now you mentioned is that well, some people use the hashtags to promote products that are not related with the event, that it's not good. Yes. And in the case of Haiti, there was something that it's also, that's why people need training, because many people write during the anniversary Haiti earthquake, and many people were scared that there was another earthquake in Haiti, and no, it was the anniversary. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
There was another part of your question that it's
I guess it's, you know, I'm assuming, maybe wrongly, that people are doing similar sentiment analysis on the tweets that are happening across the world now with, you know, everything that's taking place. So they're not necessarily natural disasters and earthquakes, etc. I'm guessing there's a whole branch of people that are looking at that in computer science, social science, you know, geographical sciences, etc.
Yes, John. In the past, for other case, we use the pre-trained model from the software. Yes, and the accuracy was 63%. The accuracy is acceptable after 50%. But in this case, what we did is train the algorithm with the proper data that we are going to classify. Then the accuracy raised a lot.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Adrian?
Hi, Dinah. Really enjoyed the talk.
Thank you.
Yeah, very thought-provoking. I have a kind of oblique question, which I think is relevant, but it would be interesting to see what your take on this is. So notwithstanding the problems of dealing with the amount and the type of data, I wonder, is there scope to consider the reason for the data. So that's the reason for the tweet. So I guess it's following in the tradition of the more of the ethnographic approach, where in this case, you might be more interested in why people are writing, not necessarily what they're writing about or the words that they're using. And so, putting it, I was just struck by your description of the context being more important. And working with some of the human geographers and cultural geographers, they worry less about amount of data and more about what the data means. So the kind of quality of it and the context of it and where that person's description and comments come from. And, they become very rich in that respect, very deep and meaningful, but not very wide. And you seem to have both, but I wonder, can you get more from the understanding of why people are writing in the context? Do you sort of, it's a very poorly formed question, if indeed it is a question, but do you get my gist?
Yeah. Well, there are people usually are motivated. Usually the 10th anniversary of the earthquake are very touching. That's why we took the opportunity to collect data, not only for this event, but for others. And we have to take into account that very few percentage of the population around the world use Twitter. Maybe other social platforms have more users. That's a limitation. Yeah, it's true. Another aspect that we focus is, I focus on the tweets in English because it's easy to understand for us. Yeah, still some there, as I said before, some of them include some touching sentence in Creole, in Haitian Creole, and in French, because those are the local language. So it's important also to later further see if the tweets in Haitian Creole or tweets in French says something different. In the case of, I did the same analysis for L'Aquila in Italy, and most of the tweets were in Italian. So that's that it's local population expressing what they feel. And in that case, and in all the cases, it's always good to have a native speaker. In the case of Italy, because there are some root expressions that Google Translate don't translate. So, and you really need to get the polarity. And also because you need to get into the mind of a local. So it's always good to have the support of local people. I have support also of local researchers for the earthquake in Croatia. So now I have a struggle because it's not easy to find someone who speaks Haitian Creole. Yes, because French is like the colonial language, it's not the local language. And of course, the fact of the use of the limitations, the limited users of Twitter, the limited user, the language creates some bias. Actually, sometimes when you see the amount of tweets that criticize Clinton Foundation, you should wonder if they are only haters or if really people who want to express an opinion about the post-disaster recovery process in Haiti. I'm not sure if I address your question or comment.
That's okay, no problem.
Mm-hmm. I want to mention, Andrew, that of course Haiti looks like as a great place to undertake research. Last year that there was the earthquake, and I belong to the earthquake engineering field investigation team. We usually visit places for earthquake reconnaissance, but the security situation didn't allow to do it. Unfortunately, the opportunities to make field work in the area, it's not possible due to security reasons.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Are there any other questions? I think that could be it, Diana. So once again, thank you for giving such a really, really interesting talk. Oh, and a round of applause, as Jenny said. That was really good. Thank you very much. This has been recorded, so this will be going onto the university server at some point for you to actually download and watch. And I'm assuming Sammy will send around details fairly shortly of the next talk as well. But thanks once again, Diana.
Thank you.